There are stories that feel too vast for numbers, too immense to be told merely through records, goals, or trophies. They must be lived to be believed. Cristiano Ronaldo is not simply a footballer. He is a phenomenon, one whose existence reshaped the very meaning of greatness. Yet for all the headlines, the awards, and the deification, what we seldom see is the struggle, the improbable path, the sheer force of will it took for him to claw his way to immortality. Before the roar of the crowds, before the Ballon d'Ors, before history bent to his will, there was silence, poverty, and doubt. Madeira was not a place for miracles, yet from its soil rose a boy who would defy the gravitational pull of obscurity. Born in 1985, Cristiano Ronaldo dos Santos Aveiro came into the world unwanted, almost unseen. His mother had decided against his birth, not out of cruelty, but from desperation. She tried to rid herself of the pregnancy, attempting self-induced abortion through alcohol and punishing runs. Methods born not of science, but of sorrow. Yet he endured, not just survived, resisted. From that first heartbeat, the world had no idea that the child it sought to deny would one day demand its reverence. The house he grew in was more a symbol of survival than shelter. 4 children crammed into a single room, no toys, no electricity, and yet a universe opened up through the round shape of a football. Christmas came and passed like a gust. No gifts, no meals to remember. Only the game remained. On cracked pavement and dusty fields, Ronaldo forged his escape. He was faster, hungrier, and far more volatile than other children. They mocked him, called him crybaby when he lashed out at their incompetence. But that name, meant to humiliate, only fueled his fire. Even then, he demanded excellence. Even then, he refused to blend in. Andorinha, a local club run partly by his father, became the first altar where he would practice his devotion. There, football was not a pastime. It was a necessity, an obsession. Ronaldo was never without a ball. It followed him like a shadow, a symbol of his intent. Scouts took notice quickly. One, conveniently his godfather, referred him to Nacional. A move followed, sealed for a mere 20 footballs and 2 kits. It was there that his legend began to take shape. Despite his small frame, he outran, outplayed, and outthought boys far older than him. They called him Abelhinha, Little B. Small, quick, stinging. Always stinging. At 12, he left the island, alone. Lisbon was the promised land, but for a boy from Madeira, it was another planet. The accent made him a target. His clothes, his mannerisms, everything marked him as less than. Loneliness became a constant companion. He was mocked, isolated, and nearly sent back. But his family, with what little they had, reminded him of the dream, that the boy who shared rooms with rats and rainwater could be something more. So he stayed, and he fought. Not just the other players, but the fear, the voices, the fatigue. And with every sprint, he refused to be ordinary. Sporting Lisbon became the forge. The academy didn't just sharpen his skills, it broke him, remolded him. He was faster than the rest, but raw, wild. His passion often boiled into arrogance. He didn't pass, he showboated. But even the coaches who doubted him could not deny the truth staring them in the face. He was different, not better, alien. When he was diagnosed with a racing heart at 15, it should have been the end. Surgery followed, a blade to the chest of a child. But not even his own body could hold him back. Within days, he was sprinting again. His legend had no pause. By 16, he had shattered every level Sporting placed in front of him. He wasn't just playing with older players, he was leading them. Captaining teams, scoring at will, making defenders question physics. Eventually, he did what no one else had. He played for every level of the club, under 16, under 17, under 18, B team, and the senior squad, all in a single season. A storm had taken human form, but it wasn't until August 6, 2003, that the world truly took notice. A friendly against Manchester United. Just another match until Ronaldo turned it into a spectacle. By the time the whistle blew, legends were begging Sir Alex Ferguson to sign him. He didn't just impress, He terrorized. Manchester United didn't wait. They paid £12.2 million, a record for a teenager. The world scoffed at the price, but Sir Alex didn't flinch. He offered Ronaldo the iconic number 7 shirt, once worn by best Cantona Beckham. The weight of history pressed down, but Ronaldo didn't bow. He embraced it. Days later, 67,000 fans watched him make his debut. Silver boots, blonde streaks, gum between his teeth. He stepped onto Old Trafford and rewrote what a debut could be. George Best himself called it the greatest first appearance he had ever seen. The boy from Madeira had arrived, and he was not going to wait for anyone. But for all the promise, greatness is never linear. His first season saw flashes of brilliance, but also moments of immaturity. Teammates were skeptical. Opponents were brutal. He dived too much, dribbled too long, celebrated too early. English fans mocked him. Commentators dismissed him as a circus act. But what they didn't realize was this. He was watching them all, calculating, adapting. While they laughed, he transformed. At night, he stayed behind after training, drilling free kicks for hours. He started gaining muscle, discipline, control. While they mocked the boy, the man was already forming. And when the time came, he would not seek their approval. He would take their respect. His first goal came through a free kick, a flash of what was to come. But it was the 2004 FA Cup final that showed the shift. Against Millwall, Ronaldo dominated, not just with skill, but with intention. The child was fading, and in his place rose a figure of purpose. That summer at Euro 2004, the transformation accelerated. Still only 19, he scored, assisted, led. He cried when Portugal lost the final to Greece. But those weren't tears of weakness. They were a promise. A storm had been building for years. But now, it had direction. And from here on, the world would feel its full force. Greatness demands a toll, and for Cristiano, the toll was solitude. As the 2004 to 2005 season began, expectations curled around his neck like a noose. The world had seen glimpses, now it demanded proof. England's defenses were brutal, relentless. Every match became a test of endurance, of mind over bruised muscle. He was hacked down, ridiculed, called a showman with no end product, but something was changing within him. He no longer danced just to mesmerize. He danced to survive. He was learning that skill must serve victory. Behind every flick, every step over, every explosive sprint, there was now purpose. He would not just entertain, he would conquer. But while the pitch became his proving ground, the shadows off it grew darker. His father, a man lost to the grip of alcohol, was dying. Years of consumption had consumed more than his liver. It had erased the father from the boy's life. Ronaldo barely knew him, yet longed for his pride. In 2005, the inevitable arrived. Death. No chance for redemption. No goodbye. Just silence. For a young man trying to become the best in the world, the death of the only man he ever wished would witness his rise created a vacuum no trophy could fill. The boy who smiled was gone. What remained was obsession, and obsession does not forgive. It does not rest. It consumes everything that is not aligned with its vision. Ronaldo returned to Manchester United changed. He was colder, harder. Every minute of every match mattered. Yet within the team, friction was brewing. Ruud van Nistelrooy, the talismanic striker, resented Ronaldo's growing spotlight. Their feud was not just personal, it was philosophical. Van Nistelrooy wanted crosses. Ronaldo wanted to create moments. The tension reached a point where the dressing room became a battleground of egos. But Ronaldo didn't retreat. He trained harder, grew stronger, refined his every movement. If they would not share the light, he would simply eclipse them. But glory continued to slip through his fingers. The 2005 to 2006 season brought no trophies. United crashed out of Europe, outpaced by a Chelsea machine under Mourinho. The fans, once dazzled, grew restless. He can't deliver when it counts, they murmured. Commentators wondered if Ronaldo would ever mature. But behind closed doors, Ferguson was watching. Not just the flaws, the will. He saw that the boy who once wept in Lisbon had now become a machine. Cold, unrelenting. He just needed one thing: focus. And Ferguson, the master sculptor of greatness, knew how to carve it out of fire and fury. Then came Germany, the 2006 World Cup, Ronaldo's crucible. In the quarterfinals, Portugal faced England, a match pregnant with narratives. When Wayne Rooney, Ronaldo's own teammate, stamped Ricardo Carvalho, Ronaldo sprinted to the referee, protested, argued. Rooney saw betrayal, England saw treason, and then the wink, a single blink of the eye that ignited an inferno. Back in England, Ronaldo was cast as the villain. Newspapers screamed for his head. Fans labeled him a traitor. But where another young man might have crumbled under the weight of national hatred, Ronaldo thrived. For the first time, he saw hatred not as a weakness, but a weapon. He returned to Manchester United as public enemy number one, and he fed on it. Every away match was a symphony of boos and slurs, and yet, match by match, goal by goal, they began to fade beneath the weight of his excellence. He had grown, faster, sharper, efficient. Gone was the boy who played for admiration. Now he played to win. The season opened with a fury. Ronaldo and Rooney, despite media fantasies of a feud, became one of the most lethal duos in Europe. Sir Alex, smiling from the shadows, knew what he had now. Not just talent, not just ambition, he had a weapon designed to destroy. Manchester United surged. Game after game, Ronaldo struck like lightning, precise, merciless. Critics who had once mocked now stuttered. That season, he won the PFA Player of the Year, Fans Player of the Year, Football Writers Player of the Year. And yet, Ronaldo didn't blink. Awards were nothing to him. He had seen his father buried with nothing. He had seen his mother cry alone. He had slept in darkness while others lived in wealth. There was no celebration in him, only pursuit. He didn't want to be among the greats. He wanted to stand above them. And standing above them meant only one thing: domination. The 2007 to 2008 season began not with hope, but certainty. Ronaldo now looked different. His body was a weapon, ripped, sculpted, unnervingly symmetrical. Defenders bounced off him like wind against stone. He scored 42 goals that season, breaking Premier League records, humiliating defenses, and making mockeries of once respected names. In the Champions League, he was a hurricane. Against Roma, Lyon, Barcelona, unstoppable. His presence tilted the pitch. Space bent around him. Then came the final. Moscow, rain, Chelsea, penalties. A moment written in script, destined to define. Ronaldo missed. A miss that could have shattered any mortal man. But destiny has a taste for patience. Terry slipped. Van der Sar saved. Manchester United triumphed. The trophy returned, and Ronaldo, drenched and stone-faced, lifted it skyward. He had reached the mountaintop, but he knew something deeper. This wasn't the end. This was the floor of his potential. That night, as London erupted and the critics stumbled to find new praises, Ronaldo stared into the future with eyes unblinking. He had tasted Europe. Now he wanted the world. And across the continent, in white marble offices and smoky negotiation rooms, a new name began whispering in the air: Real Madrid. The final crucible awaited him. The empire would call soon, but before the call of destiny came betrayal. Ferguson, desperate to hold on to his crown jewel, pleaded, manipulated, promised. Ronaldo agreed to stay one more year, one last assault on English football. But the fire inside him was already flickering towards Spain. The next season, injuries slowed him, but his numbers remained monstrous. Still, Manchester United faltered. The Champions League final saw them clash with Barcelona and Lionel Messi. Ronaldo, frustrated and exhausted, watched as Messi rose where he stumbled. In his mind, something cracked. He had dominated England. He had conquered Europe. Now there remained one final mountain. He would go to Madrid, and he would become immortal. When Real Madrid calls, it does not whisper. It speaks in echoes that rattle history itself. And when they wanted Cristiano Ronaldo, they didn't negotiate. They declared. 94 million euros, a world record. The kind of sum that makes economies blink. It was more than a signing, it was a coronation. Madrid didn't want a player, they wanted dominion. And so the contract was drafted, signed in gold and ambition. The number 9 shirt was presented because the legendary Raul still held number 7. But make no mistake, that jersey knew it was only a placeholder. The Bernabeu trembled as 80,000 fans roared, not for a player, for an arrival. His debut came swiftly, a penalty against Deportivo, a statement, a spark. But it was merely the beginning. 4 games, 4 goals. Champions League matches, free kicks, headers. He struck from all angles. Madrid had summoned a weapon, and now it fired in all directions. Just as he ignited La Liga, injury struck. A twisted ankle. Weeks of silence. The body for once resisted the mind. Yet Ronaldo returned with fury in his stride and vengeance in his eyes. He did not miss a step. Each touch became prophecy. Madrid didn't just buy talent. They had purchased inevitability. But football does not yield to individual will alone. That season, Barcelona loomed like a shadow across every horizon. Despite Ronaldo's torrent of goals, 33 in his debut season, Madrid ended trophyless. Barcelona lifted titles while Ronaldo lifted weights. It was not enough to be great. He had to be unquestioned. And the Ballon d'Or that year eluded him. But what Messi took in trophies, Ronaldo reclaimed in Raj. Behind the glass walls of Valdebebas, he trained like no human should. Not for vanity, but vengeance. If Messi wanted to dance, Ronaldo would bring the hammer. 2010 came. The World Cup beckoned. Portugal looked to Ronaldo like a drowning man clutches driftwood. But something was wrong. He was tired, injured, and, perhaps for the first time, uncertain. His body resisted, his pace dulled. He played through pain that most athletes would avoid. But the stage demanded him, and so he came. In South Africa, he moved like a ghost of himself. A goal against North Korea, nothing else. A limp Portugal exited early, and Ronaldo, once the golden boy, was now accused of fading under pressure. But those who judged did not understand the process. For greatness to evolve, it must first shed its skin. Back in Madrid, the metamorphosis accelerated. With Raul gone, the number 7 shirt became his. The pressure that number carried, the weight of Di Stefano, Butragueño, Raul, he didn't just wear it, he bent it to his will. He began scoring hat tricks like a clock chimes the hour. Racing Santander, Sevilla, Villarreal. None were spared. By the end of the season, he had 53 goals in 54 games. But once again, Barcelona. Guardiola's side were not just a team. They were a philosophy, an empire of triangles and serenity. And still, Ronaldo burned through them like a star collapsing into itself. In the Copa del Rey final, he rose, airborne, timeless, and crushed the ball into the net with a header that echoed like a war drum. That goal won Madrid the trophy, but more importantly, it won Ronaldo something deeper. Doubts surrender. He was no longer a showman. He was no longer almost the best. He was formidable. That year, he became the first player to score 40 league goals in a single La Liga season. The numbers, so often touted as exaggeration, began failing to describe him. Commentators ran out of adjectives. Analysts ran out of metrics. He became a problem that mathematics could not solve. And still, Barcelona won the league. Messi won the Ballon d'Or. Ronaldo smiled thinly and returned to the gym. He was not done. The 2011 to 2012 season began with a promise. No more second place. Mourinho now had the team he wanted. Ozil, Alonso, Benzema, each piece a polished instrument. And Ronaldo, he was the blade. In one El Clásico at the Camp Nou, Ronaldo silenced 90,000 with a goal and a gesture. Calma, calma. Be calm, he seemed to say. The king has arrived. That season, Madrid smashed records, 121 goals, 100 points. Ronaldo scored 60 goals in all competitions. It was not just a league win, it was a seizure of power. And yet the Ballon d'Or again slipped away. But Ronaldo had stopped chasing it. He was now chasing legacy. Internationally, Euro 2012 brought a Portugal reborn. Ronaldo, now captain, was not just a scorer, he was a commander. Against the Netherlands, he scored twice to send Portugal through. Against the Czech Republic, he scored the winner. The semi-final against Spain was agony. Cagey, tactical, a battle of nerves. It went to penalties. Ronaldo, slated to take the fifth, never got the chance. Spain won. And once again, Ronaldo wept. Not from shame, but because he knew he had done everything right. Destiny had turned its face away, but only for a moment. The world would not always be so lucky. That summer, Messi had 4 Ballon d'Ors. 4. A cathedral built in his image. Ronaldo had only 1, but he also had something else. A fury that had simmered into focus. He opened the 2012 to 2013 season like a beast unleashed. Hat tricks returned. Free kicks curved like physics had been rewritten. Then came the World Cup playoff against Sweden. The media made it simple. Ronaldo versus Zlatan. 2 giants. 1 ticket to Brazil. The first leg, Ronaldo scored once. The second, he scored 3. Each goal more savage than the last. Zlatan bowed, and the world knew. This was not rivalry. This was reign. In 2013, the Ballon d'Or finally returned to him. The stage was emotional. Ronaldo cried, not because he sought validation, but because he had endured the most unrelenting scrutiny in football history and stood taller for it. He had become something beyond applause, beyond criticism, a machine of purpose, hunger, and unbearable will. That season, the Champions League called again. Bayern, Dortmund, Galatasaray. Ronaldo carved through them. He finished with 17 goals in the tournament, the highest ever. And then Lisbon, the final, the city of his origin, the city where the boy had left as a dreamer. Now he returned as the executioner. This time, history would not be denied. The Champions League final of 2014 was more than a match. It was a prophecy fulfilling itself. Real Madrid stood on the brink of La Decima, their 10th European title, a number etched into the collective obsession of every Madridista for over a decade. And for Cristiano Ronaldo, it was poetic retribution. The match was set in Lisbon, the city where his journey had first diverged from normality. He arrived injured, torn. Any other player would have stepped aside. But Ronaldo played, because legends do not wait for the body's permission. They rewrite the limits of pain with purpose. Atletico Madrid struck first, their grit and steel grinding against Madrid's elegance. As the seconds drained, defeat crept toward the Madrid bench like a phantom. Then came the 93rd minute, a corner from Modric, a leap from Ramos, a header, equalizer, destiny interrupted. And once the match entered extra time, it became a massacre. Bale, Marcelo, and finally Ronaldo. A penalty. Shirtless, screaming, vein-bursting. The image was immortalized in stone that day. Madrid were champions. Ronaldo had scored a record 17 goals in a single Champions League campaign. And as he lifted the trophy, the number 10 sparkled in the sky. He had delivered La Decima with his own blood. But the price of greatness is never paid just once. The World Cup followed swiftly, and Ronaldo limped into Brazil, a shadow of the man who had conquered Lisbon. 2 separate injuries gnawed at him, his knee, his thigh, and yet he played because his nation needed him. Portugal's campaign was limp. A 4-0 humiliation by Germany, a draw with the USA, a narrow win over Ghana. And still, Ronaldo scored. A late goal, a late assist, not enough. Portugal went home on goal difference, but he had fought. That is all he knew. He would not rest, he would reset. The 2014 to 2015 season opened with fury, with Gareth Bale and Karim Benzema now forming the attacking trident dubbed the BBC. Ronaldo had become the axis. He started with 17 goals in his first 10 games, 4 goals in one match, 3 in another. He scored with his left, right, head, chest, anything. By mid-season, he had already crossed the 30-goal mark. But Madrid, as always, was a turbulent ocean. Injuries, tactical flaws, and collapses haunted the second half. The league slipped away. The Champions League, too. Ronaldo finished with 61 goals, more than anyone in Europe. And yet, again, he lifted nothing. The world applauded. He remained unsatisfied. That summer, Barcelona reclaimed Europe, and Messi regained the Ballon d'Or. The pendulum swung, but Ronaldo was already preparing. He understood now, this was not about the Ballon d'Or, it was about legacy eternal. The 2015 to 2016 season brought Zidane to the bench, and with him came clarity. Ronaldo scored his 500th career goal. Then he passed Raúl as Real Madrid's all-time leading scorer, a record built over decades, demolished in a few seasons. In the Champions League, his hat trick against Wolfsburg turned a 2-0 deficit into a 3-2 triumph. He had become more than clutch. He was cataclysm. In Milan, Madrid faced Atletico again in the final. This time, Ronaldo wasn't the hero of the match. He was its executor. The match dragged into penalties. Each player walked the plank one by one, until Ronaldo stood last. The final kick. The final act. He stepped forward like a man who had known the outcome for years. And then, net. He tore his shirt off again. The same scream, but now more controlled, more knowing. Another Champions League. Another chapter. Madrid bowed, Europe watched. And Ronaldo, he was still not done. Then came the summer of redemption, Euro 2016. For years, Portugal had leaned on Ronaldo's shoulders, only to collapse beneath the weight of expectations. But this time, something had changed. Ronaldo wasn't just a scorer, he had become a leader. Against Hungary, he scored twice. Against Wales, a goal and an assist. And then, the final, France. Ronaldo began like a firestorm, but by the 25th minute, disaster. A tackle, a tear. He collapsed. Tears fell. He tried to continue. His knee betrayed him. Substituted. Done. The man who had dragged his country to the final could no longer fight. But even broken, he refused to fade. From the sidelines in a sling, he transformed into something unthinkable. A coach, a motivator. He screamed instructions, ordered substitutions, roared after every tackle. He was more alive than the men on the pitch. And then, in extra time, Eder, a name unknown to the mythos, struck. Goal. Portugal 1-0 France. Time expired. Ronaldo sank to the grass, not in pain but in rapture. He had done it. Portugal were champions. At last, he had lifted a trophy with his country, not with goals, but with spirit. It was the culmination of a lifetime of rejection, doubt, and torment, and he had turned it into immortality. As the 2016 to 2017 season dawned, it was clear something irreversible had happened. Ronaldo was no longer the boy from Madeira, no longer the winger with tricks. He had become a machine of execution. He conserved energy now, waited, and then struck with devastating efficiency. In the Champions League, he scored 5 against Bayern Munich, 3 against Atletico. In the final, he scored twice against Juventus. Madrid became the first team to win back-to-back titles in the modern era. Ronaldo finished as top scorer again. Another Ballon d'Or came, his 5th. The scoreboard of history was now level, and still, he reached higher. That summer, the Spanish courts opened an investigation. Tax evasion, a shadow over his throne. The media circled like vultures. But Ronaldo responded the only way he knew. On the pitch, Super Cup, El Clásico. He came on as a substitute, scored a rocket against Barcelona, and mimicked Messi's famous shirt-hold celebration. Then the red card. Then the push on the referee. 5-game ban. It was war again. Against the system. Against time. Against the world. But Ronaldo had evolved beyond pressure. He was not playing for fans, for fame, for favor. He was playing against history itself. And he intended to win. The 2017 to 2018 season began beneath a storm. His 5-game suspension loomed, but Ronaldo was not the kind to fade in absence. When he returned, he did not knock. He obliterated the door. He scored in every Champions League group stage game, something no player had ever done. He devoured Dortmund, dismantled APL, humiliated Spurs. Each goal felt heavier now, like a king carving his legacy into stone. Critics murmured about his age, his pace, his body, but they didn't understand. He was not the same man. He had shed the need for flair. What remained was pure substance. No wasted motion, just destruction dressed in white. In the knockout rounds, the carnage escalated. Against PSG, the nouveau riche juggernaut, Ronaldo scored 3 goals across 2 legs. While Neymar danced for cameras, Ronaldo ended dreams. Then came Juventus, the first leg in Turin. 2 goals, but one of them transcended football. Carvajal crossed, Ronaldo leapt. He hung in the air, suspended, statuesque, supernatural, and struck a bicycle kick so exquisite that even Juventus fans rose to applaud. Buffon, a titan himself, could only stare. Ronaldo, unsmiling, walked away like a man who had known the goal before it left his boot. The world had no words, because he had moved beyond language. He had entered myth. The return leg brought a scare. Juventus clawed back 3 goals. The Bernabeu quivered. Then, in the dying minutes, Ronaldo stepped to the penalty spot. Ice in his veins, thunder in his foot. Goal. Madrid advanced. In the semi-finals, Bayern Munich awaited. Yet another fortress. Yet another dynasty to crumble. Ronaldo did not score in the second leg, but his presence twisted defenders into ghosts. Madrid advanced to another final. Ronaldo, now a veteran among princes, moved through games like a monarch. Untouched, untouchable. Kiev loomed. Liverpool stood in the way. Salah, Maine, Firmino. But they were not prepared for the end of eras. The final came, cloaked in tension. Liverpool struck first with fear, but Madrid answered with madness. Gareth Bale's acrobatic wonder goal stole the headlines. Karius gifted Madrid 2 more. Ronaldo did not score, but that wasn't the point. He had brought them there. He had made them believe again and again. And as he lifted his 5th Champions League trophy, his 3rd in a row, the murmurs returned. Is he leaving? The post-match interviews hinted at unrest. The press circled. Ronaldo was no longer simply a player. He had become a brand too big for any club to contain. Real Madrid, as colossal as they were, now stood in the shadow of a single man. And then, he left. In the summer of 2018, Cristiano Ronaldo severed ties with Real Madrid. 9 seasons, 438 games, 450 goals, 4 Champions Leagues, 2 La Ligas, 2 Copa del Reys, 3 Club World Cups. Hundreds of records. Madrid wept. Florentino Perez blinked. But Ronaldo had made his decision. A new mountain called to him. Italy, Juventus, another kingdom, another language, another battlefield. He was 33. Any other man would retire at the summit. But Ronaldo was not mortal. He was an unfulfilled prophecy. He wanted to prove one final point, that he didn't need Madrid, that any empire he entered would kneel. His Juventus unveiling was surreal. No player in Serie A history had arrived with such thunder. The press room overflowed. The fans rioted with joy. The squad stared in awe. This wasn't a transfer. It was a seismic shift. He took the number 7, as always. And on the training ground, he ran harder than players 10 years younger. Teammates were bewildered. He was first to arrive, last to leave. Every shot, every sprint, every rep, perfect. Some thought he would coast, but Ronaldo never coasted. He devoured. And when the season began, the goals followed. Game after game, he adapted, evolved, led, always led. His first season ended with 28 goals, a Scudetto, and the Player of the Year award. But the Champions League, the Holy Grail, remained elusive. Against Atletico Madrid in the round of 16, Juventus lost 2-0 in the first leg. The media scoffed. He's finished. Too old. They forgot what he was. In the return leg, he reminded them. 3 goals, 1 header, 1 penalty, 1 unstoppable strike. Single-handedly, he dragged Juventus to the next round. The roar in the Allianz Stadium that night was not for a player, it was for a force of nature. Ronaldo walked off, hand raised, jaw set. The world had doubted again. The world had lost again. But Juventus' journey ended in the next round. Ajax, a youthful hurricane, blew through the quarterfinals. Ronaldo scored as always, but the team collapsed. It was a reminder that even gods cannot rescue the unworthy. Yet Ronaldo did not point fingers. He trained harder, spoke less, demanded more. In the next season, he scored 37 goals in all competitions at 35 years old. And still, people whispered, "He's fading. The end is near." But what they did not understand, what they never seemed to understand, is that Ronaldo does not age like men. He adapts like predators. He doesn't decay, he refines. In 2021, amid the suffocation of the pandemic and the slow decay of Juventus's European hopes, the rumors began again. Manchester United called, the club where it all began. And Ronaldo, tired of fighting for those who could not match his hunger, answered. The prodigal son returned, but this time not as a boy, as a god returning to mortal soil. Old Trafford exploded, shirts sold in the millions. The world watched. And in his second debut, he scored twice. The Premier League, long past the era of its first Ronaldo reckoning, was about to remember who it had forgotten. But Manchester United was broken. The structure, the tactics, the vision, rotting. Ronaldo's brilliance could not mask incompetence forever. He scored goals, late winners, dazzling volleys. But the club faltered, and when he dared to speak, dared to challenge the rot, he was branded a traitor. Interviews were edited, quotes were weaponized. The same fans who once worshipped turned their backs. But Ronaldo was never here for applause. He had come full circle, only to find the home he loved had forgotten how to be great. So he walked, not with defeat, but with dignity. Because the storm does not answer to the wind, it answers only to itself. After his explosive departure from Manchester United, the world anticipated chaos. Where would he go? Was this the end? The media, hungry for narratives they could barely comprehend, labeled him a has-been, an ego too inflated for modern football. But beneath their lies was a darker truth. They feared him. For Ronaldo had exposed something no one dared to admit. Greatness has no place in a system that rewards compliance over conquest. He refused to nod silently as mediocrity spread like mold, and in doing so, he was cast out, not for failing, but for speaking. Then came the decision that sent shockwaves across every level of football. Cristiano Ronaldo signed for Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. The same man who once silenced the Camp Nou, who shattered Juventus in Turin and torched Bayern in Munich, would now take his fury to a place the European elite had mocked for decades. The press laughed. Finished. Money move. Legacy tarnished. But they misunderstood again. Ronaldo wasn't retreating. He was redefining. He had already dominated Europe. What remained was the expansion of empire. And if Europe had turned its back on greatness, then he would take it elsewhere and make them regret it. The numbers, of course, did what they always do in Ronaldo's presence, shattered. In his first appearances, he scored hat tricks, free kicks, headers, tap-ins, thunderbolts. The opposition changed, but the outcome never did. Fans poured into stadiums just to witness him move. Children cried when he walked by. Players begged for his shirt. The world remembered something Europe had forgotten, what it meant to stand in the presence of a phenomenon. The ridicule turned to awe, and the narrative began to twist again. Could he return? Should we have let him go? But it was too late. The sword had left the sheath. The world would bleed. Critics now argued the quality of the league. The pitches weren't as green, the defenders not as quick. But that wasn't the point. Ronaldo wasn't there to prove he could still play. He was there to show that wherever he goes becomes the center of gravity. In every nation, from Madeira to Madrid, Manchester to Riyadh, he became the sun, and the stars revolved around him. While Europe bickered over tactics and statistics, Ronaldo created a cultural shockwave. Saudi Arabia's football viewership exploded. He trained, like a soldier awaiting war. Teammates whispered about his intensity, his discipline, his refusal to rest, to eat incorrectly, to skip a session. Younger players who thought they knew hard work were forced to recalibrate reality. Ronaldo did not stop. At 38, his body obeyed like a machine, but his mind had become something more. He did not crave applause. He sought to shape football's future. He was no longer just an athlete. He had become a living standard, and for many, a condemnation, because in his presence, their excuses evaporated. But even the strongest minds cannot outrun the erosion of time, and deep beneath the sculpted surface, Ronaldo began to confront the most human question of all. What remains when the roar fades? He had scaled every mountain, lifted every cup, silenced every critic. Yet he was still here, still hungry, still sharpening blades for battles that no longer existed. Football had not outgrown him. He had outgrown football. But walking away? That was never an option. Because for Ronaldo, the war had never been against opponents. It had always been against himself. The world around him changed too. Messi, now in MLS, lifted the World Cup with Argentina. The last battle that had always haunted Ronaldo seemed to close without him. The press tried to use it to seal the narrative. Messi the artist, Ronaldo the gladiator. But they missed the nuance, as always. Messi won his final act within a system built for him. Ronaldo, he had fought his wars alone, across hostile fields, defiant boards, and crumbling teams. He didn't ride momentum, he dragged it. And while Messi's World Cup brought closure, Ronaldo's story remained open-ended, because he had never asked for endings, only challenges. Then came Euro 2024 qualification. Portugal, a new generation emerging, and there he was again. Older, slower perhaps, but no less dangerous. He scored. Of course he scored. But now his role was different. He was the patriarch, the totem of legacy. Every touch, every shot carried not just threat, but history. The younger players looked to him not as a teammate, but as an institution. He wasn't simply leading, he was passing the flame. And yet he never let it slip from his grasp. He remained the edge, the spark, because even now he knew, if they needed him, he would bleed again. Every great story demands reflection, and yet with Ronaldo, reflection feels like a betrayal, because to look back implies an end, and there is no end. Even now, as records continue to fall, as interviews swirl, as his name trends across continents, Cristiano Ronaldo remains incomplete. And that is the terrifying part. For most men, their final chapters are slow fades into obscurity. But Ronaldo, he has never belonged to that order. He will not vanish. He will transform into a myth, into a memory too vivid to forget, into a standard so high it suffocates all who follow. And what will be said of him when the dust settles? That he scored goals, won trophies, inspired billions? Yes, but that would be insufficient. The truth is, Cristiano Ronaldo represents a kind of human will that your species is almost too fragile to comprehend. He was not born for comfort, he was not made for compromise, he was forged to dominate. And when he finally walks off the pitch for the last time, whether in Portugal, Saudi Arabia, or some other stage your petty imaginations cannot conceive, the world will feel it like a silence after a storm. Not because the storm is over, but because nothing that loud could ever truly end. Every king must one day look upon his kingdom and wonder, was it enough? Ronaldo had conquered more than most empires, but there, in the silence between matches, a new enemy emerged. Not time, not critics, not even rivals, but emptiness. He had climbed Everest, only to find the summit lonely. Every boot he laced, every goal he scored, was no longer about proving others wrong. It was about silencing a voice within that dared to ask, what now? For a man whose identity was forged in the fire of pursuit, the absence of challenge was its own form of death. In Saudi Arabia, the applause never ceased. Fans who had never before seen such majesty wept at his presence. Children wore his name. Foreigners traveled thousands of miles just to catch a glimpse. But Ronaldo, for the first time, was not fueled by adoration. It passed through him like wind through iron. He trained with monastic focus. His goals were surgical. And yet, when he walked off the pitch, his face often bore no triumph. Not because he didn't care, but because victory had become routine. And routine for a being like him was a kind of suffocation. Interviews came, some staged, others honest. In them, Ronaldo oscillated between pride and restlessness. He spoke of legacy, of family, of the next generation. But behind his eyes there was still the spark, the untamed fire that had carried him from concrete alleys in Madeira to palaces of football. He wanted more, not of fame, not of fortune, but of asterisk meaning. He had become so efficient, so precise, that football began to look too small for him, like a suit he had outgrown but continued to wear for others. He wasn't bored, he was evolving, and that terrified the world. And then came the resurgence, Euro 2024. Portugal, under new management, fielded a squad younger, faster, more tactically fluid. Many wondered aloud, should Ronaldo start? Should he retire? The very question was an insult, a grotesque ignorance of history, and yet he didn't lash out. He didn't beg for minutes. He waited, watched, and when he was called upon, he did what only he could. He changed matches with a single movement, not just through goals, but gravity. He drew defenders like iron to a star. He made others better by merely being. It was not just contribution, it was command. In the group stage, he scored twice. One header, one penalty. Simple, efficient, inevitable. But his celebration was different now. No explosive chest pound, no egotistic roar. Just a calm wave, a nod. As if to say, of course I did. For Ronaldo now lived in a space of serene devastation. The chaos he once needed to thrive had been replaced by certainty. He didn't need to convince anyone. Not teammates, not doubters, not even himself. The records were no longer goals, they were footnotes, because he had already become what he set out to be, inevitable. The knockout rounds began with noise. Critics returned, snaking through the corridors of commentary. He's too old. They should start Ramos. He slows the system. But the coaches, the players, they knew better. Ronaldo was not just a striker. He was the psychological axis of the team, the force around which all pressure spun. When he stood over a free kick, even the opposing bench held its breath. And in the round of 16, in a tense 1-1 draw, it was his penalty in the final minute of extra time that won the match. Cold, unblinking, unerring. Because some things do not rust, they calcify into legends. After the match, a reporter asked him, "Do you ever think about stopping?" Ronaldo laughed, a low, deliberate laugh. Stop what? Breathing? The question was absurd to him. Quitting was not a function he possessed. If the legs slowed, the mind sharpened. If the minutes decreased, the impact deepened. He had always been an equation that refused to balance. Football was no longer about fitness. It was about force of will, and no one in history had ever possessed more. Retirement to Ronaldo was not a career decision. It was a betrayal of purpose, and he had never betrayed his own standards. But as the tournament progressed, something unexpected stirred in the background. A conversation, not in the press, but in whispers among institutions, brands, nations. Ronaldo was becoming too powerful, not politically, not financially, but culturally. He had crossed over, from athlete to symbol, from man to movement. Children in countries where football was an afterthought now knew his name before their own presidents. He influenced economies, viewership trends, generational aspirations. He had become unchallengeable. And that, to the fragile thrones of influence scattered across this world, was unacceptable. So they tried again. The old methods, spin, smear, dismissal. Pundits planted whispers about vanity, control issues, diminishing returns. But it didn't matter because Ronaldo was no longer playing for them. He was playing for those who would come after him, for the child who had nothing but a street and a plastic ball, for the father who wakes at dawn to provide, for the dreamer who gets laughed at for dreaming. Ronaldo wasn't defending a legacy. He was building a bridge across time, one forged in sweat, agony, resilience, a bridge that would allow others to cross if they could endure the fire. And in one final match of that tournament, semi-final stage, tension boiling, the score stood 0-0. 90 minutes passed, then 120th. Penalties loomed. He stepped forward first, always taking the weight. He struck it clean. Net rippled. Silence. Then the crowd erupted. But he did not. He turned, walked back, no emotion, because to him, this wasn't pressure, this wasn't bravery, this was routine. Because when you're Cristiano Ronaldo, being a god is no longer an act of glory, it is simply an obligation. The penalty was converted. Portugal advanced. But Ronaldo's face betrayed nothing. No joy, no vengeance, just acceptance. Because by now, he understood something the world refused to confront. He was playing against time, not opponents. And time, cruel and inexorable, doesn't boo, tackle, or interview. It erodes, quietly, invisibly. It does not test your muscles, it tests your meaning. And that night, as he walked off the pitch while his younger teammates chanted and celebrated, Ronaldo remained apart, not by design, but by nature. He was no longer part of the group. He was the legend they were orbiting. In the final, Portugal met their match, a tactically superior side, younger, sharper, hungrier. And Ronaldo, for all his precision, could not bend the match to his will this time. They lost. And for once, the cameras captured something more haunting than his tears, his stillness. He didn't rage, didn't drop to his knees. He simply stood, eyes distant, as if viewing the moment from outside of himself. Perhaps he was remembering the boy who once sprinted through the streets of Madeira, or the father who never lived long enough to witness all of this. Or perhaps he saw the end, just beyond the stadium lights. But end is a word that belongs to ordinary lives. For Ronaldo, the loss didn't mark closure. It was simply a transition. Back at his club, back in Saudi Arabia, he returned to training 3 days later. Not because he needed to, because he had to. He trained with teenagers, outpaced them, outlifted them, outfocused them. Teammates asked why. Why push so hard when you've already won everything? He gave no speeches, just silence. A silence loud enough to shake their excuses apart. Because for Ronaldo, discipline is not motivation. It is identity star. And when the world stops watching, he keeps going. Sponsorships surged. Global audiences spiked. Streaming services began circling Saudi leagues like vultures, sensing not death, but profit. Ronaldo wasn't just affecting football, he was tilting the axis of global sport. Suddenly others followed. Benzema, Neymar, Modric. The migration began. But there was a difference. They were seeking contracts, comfort, control. Ronaldo had come for impact. And now the empire was being built around him. No longer Madrid's pawn, no longer United's scapegoat. He was the architect now. Every whisper in every boardroom in FIFA, UEFA, and commercial institutions carried his shadow. Because Ronaldo had become bigger than the ecosystem that birthed him. And yet within all this movement, all this power, the man remained haunted by one final question. Have I left enough? Not trophies, not records, but blueprints. Will the next generation understand what it truly means to suffer for greatness? To say no to comfort? To war against weakness? That's why he kept showing up early. Why he corrected defenders in training. Why he lectured on diet, sleep, habits. Not out of ego, out of urgency. Because he knew what history often forgets. Legends fade if no one carries the fire. And so he lit torches in every corner of the world, hoping at least one would blaze. Interviews became more selective, questions more pointed. Who's the next Ronaldo, they asked. He never answered, because there would not be one. There would be imitators, talented, fast, technical, brilliant. But the hunger, the volcanic refusal to ever be average, that is not taught, it is forged. And the furnace that created Ronaldo no longer exists. A world of comfort, contracts, and curated image has made certain of that. What he represented, a complete surrender of self to ambition, was now rare, maybe extinct, and that, more than any match, broke his heart. There were days now when his body spoke louder than his mind. A knee that hesitated, a sprint that burned a second too long. Age had finally come, not as a fall, but as a whisper. He could still outrun others, yes, still score, still command, but he felt it, in the recovery, in the bruises that lingered. The silence after games grew longer. Ice packs stayed on longer. But not once did he consider stopping, because greatness, when real, is incurable. And Ronaldo, having tasted that godlike momentum for 2 decades, would rather burn out on the pitch than rot in leisure. He spoke once, not to a reporter, but to a young player. The cameras weren't rolling. It wasn't a scripted moment. The boy had asked nervously, "What if I don't make it?" Ronaldo looked at him and said, "Then you didn't want it enough." Harsh, maybe, but true. He had no time for soft truths. His life was not paved in fortune. It was carved from pain, rejection, isolation, rage. Every room he entered, he had to break his way into. And if this young player wanted a shortcut, a smile, a fairy tale, he was speaking to the wrong God. Back on the pitch, the goals still came. Slower now, less frequent, but they carried more weight. When Ronaldo scored, crowds didn't just cheer, they exhaled, as though reminded that reality hadn't yet broken the spell. He was still here, still fighting. Every celebration now felt like a quiet defiance of nature. And deep down, fans understood. These were borrowed moments, gifts from a timeline that should have closed long ago. They stood and applauded not the man, but the miracle of his persistence. Because somewhere in every soul, there is a part that yearns to resist gravity. Ronaldo was that part. And when he knelt on the grass one day, alone after a match, the stadium dimming, the cameras cutting to post-match analysis, he stayed there, not hurt, not emotional, just present, eyes closed, hands resting, as if listening for something. Maybe the sound of time finally catching up, or the silence left behind by a billion roars. And yet in that stillness, there was no regret, no fear, just the knowledge that he had given everything, and then kept going. Because that is what separates man from myth, the willingness to suffer for something that only the future will fully understand. As the seasons dragged forward and the calendar refused to pause, Ronaldo began to move differently, not slower, but calmer. Every movement felt selected, every pass, every run, measured like an architect tracing the final lines of a cathedral. The goals didn't erupt, they unfolded, like ancient runes remembered only by those who had seen him at his apex. He wasn't playing with the game anymore. He was playing above it, a man among actors, a storm among wind. And in those moments when the ball left his foot and the net rippled, the world stopped, not to cheer, but to remember. And it was memory now that defined him. Not just the memory of trophies or titles, but the memory he had become. Ask anyone, anywhere, to name greatness, and they will not list traits. They will say a name, Ronaldo, because he is no longer a man. He is a reference point for discipline, for obsession, for the raw, terrifying pursuit of perfection. He is the scale upon which others are weighed and found wanting, not because they lack talent, but because they lack the one thing he never allowed himself to lose: the hunger to become impossible. Legacy is a word thrown around by those desperate to matter. But Ronaldo never chased legacy. He built inevitability. His presence stretched across borders, cultures, ideologies. You didn't have to like him to believe in him. In fact, belief in him became involuntary. You could mock his celebration, his ego, his interviews, but when he stepped over the ball, everything in you watched. Because he represented something no algorithm, no boardroom, no modern branding could create: earned fear. The kind of fear that makes defenders forget how to breathe, that makes fans pray when he rises for a header, that still makes the world hold its breath. Yet greatness, even in its purest form, is never immune to loneliness. And Ronaldo knew that better than anyone. Not loneliness of isolation, but the deeper kind, the loneliness of standing where no one else can follow. At 39, he looked around locker rooms and saw boys who idolized him scored hat tricks in reply. They hadn't walked into legendary clubs and become the standard. He had, and that solitude was eternal. And yet he embraced it, because he understood now, he had not been chosen for ease. He had been designed for endurance. His story was not one of rise and fall, but of relentless persistence. He was not built to peak and fade. He was built to outlast. And as the world crowned new stars, new prodigies, new heirs, Ronaldo simply watched. Not with envy, not with resentment, but with a kind of surgical awareness. Because he knew they would all face what he had, the pressure, the doubt, the betrayal, and most of them would crumble, because none of them had walked through fire and kept walking. He began giving more time to his children. His son, already showing promise on the pitch, looked at him not as a superstar, but as a standard. And that frightened Ronaldo more than any defender ever had, because now the battle wasn't about winning, it was about teaching. How do you explain the burden of ambition? How do you translate the pain of being elite to someone who has never known the dark alleys you crawled through? He trained with him, laughed with him, but in his heart, he knew, you cannot inherit the storm. You must become it. The press, ever starving, began turning to retrospective pieces. Was Ronaldo the greatest, they debated? Was his style effective or indulgent? Was he better than Messi? But these were the mutterings of spectators trying to reduce a galaxy into a graph. Ronaldo didn't read the articles, not out of indifference, but irrelevance, because he knew time always tells the truth. And time had already begun telling his. Statues were erected, museums opened, records labeled unbreakable because they bore his name. But even then, he remained unsatisfied, because records were only mirrors. What he sought now was eternity. That eternity, he realized, would not come from football alone. And so, he began to build beyond the pitch. Academies, philanthropy, training empires, brands not built for profit, but for propagation. The Ronaldo method, discipline, nutrition, obsession, began being taught in cities across continents. Young players trained under his system, coaches studied his body mechanics. Entire fitness industries realigned around his principles, because it wasn't just about how he played, it was about how he prepared, how he lived, how he endured. Even if no one ever matched his output, they would carry pieces of him into the next century. Still, he played. Every match another chapter, every goal another inscription. But now when he looked in the mirror, he saw not the sculpted icon the world adored, but the cost, the decades of self-denial, the friendships sacrificed, the childhood postponed. And yet, he would choose it again, because glory, real glory, is never achieved by balance. It is achieved by imbalance willingly embraced. And Ronaldo had given everything, every second, to the idea that he could be more than man. And in doing so, he had become a warning to mediocrity itself. And when the time finally comes, and yes, even he knows it must, there will be no parade grand enough, no chant loud enough, no tribute deep enough. Because what Cristiano Ronaldo built was not a career. It was a template of transcendence. And when the boots are hung, the stadiums go dark, and the world scrolls on, there will still be echoes. Every time a boy strikes a ball with fury in his chest, every time a girl trains when no one is watching, every time ambition silences doubt, he will be there. Not in statue, not in footage, but in fire. Always in fire. When the final whistle comes, not the last match, but the last meaningful one, the world won't recognize it at first. There will still be goals, appearances, even brilliance. But somewhere, subtly, Ronaldo will begin to step back. Not in performance, but in presence. The training sessions will grow quieter. The post-match interviews fewer. The Instagram posts more reflective than defiant. And those watching closely, those who understand, will know. The sun does not crash when it sets. It simply recedes behind the horizon, leaving light in its wake. The retirement will not be a press conference, no sponsored documentary, no orchestrated farewell tour. That's not his way. No, he will vanish on his own terms. Maybe mid-season, maybe mid-contract, maybe after a final goal that leaves the crowd in stunned silence. And then, gone. No tears, no drama, just absence. And it is then, not before, that the world will feel it. Like oxygen being withdrawn, like a rhythm breaking. Because for 2 decades, football didn't exist beside Ronaldo. It existed through him. The analysts will descend, career retrospectives, statistical debates, lists and rankings. But their conclusions will fall short. Because you cannot define a force of nature with spreadsheets. You cannot summarize a supernova with bullet points. You cannot place Ronaldo among the greats. He is not among. He is above. Not because of trophies, but because of what he demanded of the human body, the human mind, the human spirit. He pushed the species closer to its edge and dared others to follow. Most didn't. Most couldn't. But some will try, and in them, fragments will burn. A sprint here, a free kick there, a goal celebration, shamelessly imitated. And in those moments, Ronaldo will flicker again. Because legacy is not static. It lives, multiplies, invades. And for generations yet unborn, his name will mean something they won't need explained. Like gravity or thunder, Ronaldo will become shorthand for the unthinkable, the unreachable, the relentless. A word that means, yes, it is possible, but only if you sacrifice everything. And what of him then? When the pitches are no longer his domain, when the roar becomes memory, he will not fade. He will build a fortress of institutions, a dynasty of discipline, the CR7 academies, the nutrition protocols, the sports science labs. These won't be vanity projects. They will be legacies with muscle. Structures to train not just athletes, but killers of doubt. The next Ronaldo may never arrive, but if one does, it will be because he built the road. He didn't just win the game, he rewrote its architecture. And in his own home, he will walk halls hung with impossible moments. Signed jerseys, golden boots, family photographs, a museum of memory. But he won't linger on them, because Ronaldo never lived in the past. His eyes were always fixed forward. And if you asked him, what's your proudest moment? He might smile, not at a goal or a cup, but at the fact that he never gave in. That every time the world told him to stop, he asked it why. And every time it dared to doubt, he answered in blood. The young players of tomorrow will study him, not like an idol, but like an equation. They will dissect his movements, his diet, his sleep patterns. They will mimic his rituals, hoping to catch fire in repetition. But what they'll never fully capture, what no analysis will uncover, is why he did it. The torment, the obsession, the solitude, the necessity. Because for Ronaldo, greatness was never a destination, it was a requirement for breath. And that is something no camera can document, no curriculum can teach. And when the world reaches its next phase, when football, as it always does, shifts, evolves, forgets, there will remain one name carved too deep to erase, not because of nostalgia, but because of function. Ronaldo is not a relic, he is a reference point. Every decade, every era, every star who rises will be compared, not to each other, but to him. And more often than not, the answer will be, not quite, not fast enough, not strong enough, not ruthless enough, because he has become the line between legend and noise. And maybe on some quiet day in the far-off future, long after he stopped playing, you'll see him again. Not at a stadium, not on a stage, but walking somewhere, alone, head high, stride unbroken. And maybe a child will recognize him, whisper his name, and in that child's eyes the flame will flicker again. Because Ronaldo does not need a ball to be great. He needs only space to exist. And where he exists, doubt dies. In that moment, as the world moves on, something in you will realize he is still winning. So this is the story, not of a footballer, not of a record holder, not of a legend. This is the story of the last gladiator, the one who stared into the abyss of human limitation and refused to blink. Cristiano Ronaldo is not just the greatest, he is the greatest reminder that pain can be fuel, that pressure can be sculpted, that perfection is not a myth, but a choice repeated daily. He was not given magic, he forged it. And in doing so, he did not just leave a mark on football, he left a scar on time itself.